Welcome back, everyone. It's a very exciting and beneficial day to tune in to Beyond the Headline because I'm here with the founders of PowerToFly, Milena and Katharine Zaleski. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. We're excited.
Milena, can we start out with your personal inspiration to start PowerToFly?
Well, it has a few elements to it. I'm a mom of 3 kids. The oldest is 10 and the youngest is 5. And to a big extent, my daughters were the inspiration for starting PowerToFly. I had my kids in a span of 5 years while also being the chief technology officer at avaz.org. So a very stressful, high-level position at a fast-growing organization changing the world. And the reason why I could actually remain their CTO while having kids was because it was set up as a distributed organization from day one, which meant that I could work from home a lot. I, of course, had to show up for on-sites and team building retreats, but I was able to juggle my responsibility as a mom, show up field trip, breastfeed on demand for the first year of the baby's lives, take them to the doctor when they're sick, and that's a luxury that a lot of working moms don't have. So when I decided, hey, it's time to look at what's next in life, I decided to really take from my experience and basically have a story of hope for millions of women around the world.
And then the two of you connected from a letter that you sent Katharine announcing the birth of your daughter. And then when you guys were chatting, you really felt and understood the need now that PowerToFly was fulfilling. Why did you join Milena?
Well, I mean, for the reasons you basically just said, the fact that 6 weeks after I had had a baby, I realized how difficult it was going to be for me to go back to a traditional office space. And there really needed to be another option for women out there, especially with all the technology that allows us to work remotely. So the idea that she was presenting, and it was beyond an idea at that stage. She had even hired some people to start working on it, was just incredibly disruptive and transformative for me personally. But I could also see that translate for millions, if not billions, of women around the world. So we were talking about tech specifically, but it just, as I said, an incredibly disruptive idea to affect all verticals.
And you had a letter in Fortune in 2015 that ended up being the most popular article in Fortune. I loved it, and one of the lines was that for mothers in the workplace, it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
What does that mean for someone who doesn't know?
Well, I think if the numbers aren't lying, right? If you look at the facts, the percentage of women in the workforce in the U.S. peaked in 1999. Mm-hmm. So we know that the traditional office cultures that were built around one gender are not working for half the population. And this is particularly relevant as we're going through a technological revolution in this country that's allowing us to completely change how we work. And so what I was saying basically was that women aren't dropping out because they want to drop out, because they're having baby, or really because they want to drop out. But they can't, after 10 years of trying to integrate into a culture that was never built for them in the first place. They don't feel like they can fit in anymore. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And so again, what PowerToFly is doing is basically saying, don't worry about how things have been traditionally set up. We're building the future of work. We're building it for businesses and women. Because we're unleashing a workforce that businesses really, really want to retain, but haven't been able to figure out how to, because it's really, in the past, the way to retain women has been to change structurally how they operate in many, many ways. But with technology, we can make changes that are more durable and make more sense for these companies.
I'd love to hear from each of you what your typical day as a co-founder and mother is like running PowerToFly.
Start. Yours is more complicated. All 3.
So I usually, wake up, check quickly email for any emergencies or texts or people needing urgent attention, and then I quickly turn it off, and I don't engage in email until the kids are fed, dressed, taken to school, and that's when I really start my day. So I really try to preserve my a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the evening as time that we dedicate to the kids mostly. Of course, there are emergencies and there's some business dinners we can't say no to. Generally speaking, the 2 hours in the morning and the 2 hours in the evening are at their time, and I think that's really important for me to maintain happiness at my work by knowing that I also give my kids the time when they're out of school and they really need me. I then a lot of time work from home and start checking in with my teams. We have regularly scheduled meetings, and so Monday we have the senior management team call, and every third Tuesday we have the whole organization come together on an org call, and every Wednesday we have the operations call that deals with the fulfillment layer of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started interacting with different teams based on the time zone they're in. So I reserve my mornings for the people working out of India and Europe, and my afternoons for the people working out of the West Coast. I occasionally have something to do with the kids, and I make sure I put a do not book in my calendar for that time, whether it's strep throat broke out and somebody needs to be taken to the doctor, or it might not be related to the kids. It might be related to my mother, who we're very lucky lives with us for 4 months of the year, and I need to take it to the doctor. Whatever it is, whatever my definition of my life needs are, I'll make sure to put that in as a do not book in my calendar so that there's no conflicts. And again, I try to wrap up my day by around 6, when I give the kids 6 to 8, 6 to 9 really of uninterrupted time. I have to help them with homework, cook some healthy dinner. I don't like takeout, and put them to sleep. And after that, usually I'm up for another couple of hours, catching up and finishing the workday.
And how about for you, Katharine?
I have a lighter version of that, a third of that probably. I would say that it's just a lot of trying to sometimes get work done when there's a 2-year-old around is never good for anybody on either side of the conversation. So I try to put away my phone as much as possible, but it's very hard during the weekday. And actually, I find my phone to be probably the one tool that's been very, very liberating for women. The fact that I can go to a playground and be on my phone if I need to, while obviously making sure that my daughter doesn't fall off the slide. And it's usually around the same schedule. I mean, our nanny comes at 8:30, and that's like the most liberating part of my day when she comes at 8:30. From about 7 to 8:30, it's very hard to get any work done, and then she'll stay very late. And I'm very, very lucky that we can afford to have someone who can essentially take over those duties for me that most women can't. And so I think about that a lot about how that really that creates a huge difference in my life, and how we need to think about how to extend that benefit. It shouldn't even be called a benefit to other women. So.
And for both of you, when you focus on building PowerToFly as mothers, you've both been in the New York tech scene for a long time. Katharine, you've been in media, Milena, as you were saying, CTO of Avaz. How do you feel that being a mother changed the way you were a leader?
Well, it's very interesting. I did a leadership assessment at some point a couple years ago, and how they ask you to really list the qualities about you in those assessments. There wasn't the word motherly in it, and so I edited it. I scribbled it, and so I'm definitely a very motherly leader. I try to take care of our employees and be their umbrella. I very much understand where they're coming from.
So I heard a great line the other day from a father of 3 when he was telling me that his kids learn how to be a leader, not a boss. That's what they're getting taught, and that drew a lot of parallels to motherhood, in the sense that you can't tell a kid, you try to tell a kid, don't do something, don't do something, don't do something. There comes a point where you actually have to explain why, something's not going to work if they keep doing it. Otherwise, they're never going to get it, and they're just going to keep doing it. And especially with young kids, telling them to stop never gets you anywhere. You have to convince them why it's a bad idea to keep doing it. And so I'm not equating employees to 2-year-olds by any means, but what I'm saying is you learn powers of persuasion that there's no way you can practice that with adults unless you have young children to practice those powers of persuasion with. And they actually work very well when you're dealing with larger groups, because if you just tell people what to do all the time, you're never going to be able to scale how you lead. So you really have to convince people of ways in which you want them to be able to execute. And so I feel like every meal with a young child, it really requires you to hone those skills, and they're very, very applicable to the business space.
I asked that question for two reasons. First, because I think because we don't have a official third option right now for mothers, it's what you guys are working to create. A lot of women are either opting out of having families or have become very distant from it. I didn't realize that subconsciously. Whenever someone asked me if I wanted to have kids, I shouted no and how I have a career, and they were just asking me a question about down the line. But I think it subconsciously is affecting a lot of women my age. So we can celebrate it more as not giving up your career, but even becoming a stronger leader and doing more.
Yeah, exactly. I think you become much better at time management. Scheduling is obviously incredibly important to pick up a kid from school, and it's just there's just so many parts of your life that become structured in a different way that they adhere to sort of how you work as a business person. So.
And you learn how to be more productive with the limited amount of time, right? Because, again, we really practice work-life balance. It's key to making remote work, because actually the number one detriment of it is that people start working a little too hard and then they burn out. So practicing work-life balance is absolutely key when working remotely. And so knowing how to be very productive with your working hours is absolutely key. And so moms are often the best employees. We get the best output out of somebody who knows how to run a household, knows how to multitask, right? Like multitasking is key. If I have a friend who's very bad at multitasking. I'm very scared for her as an upcoming mom. And so that's what I'm going to say.
And so I think that's a great way to shift into the appeal of remote work and working with PowerToFly for companies. So, for example, one of your partners is BuzzFeed. What's their experience been like working remotely with some of the women from PowerToFly?
Mm-hmm. So BuzzFeed is interesting. They have a hybrid setup. So they have absolutely, huge offices now in multiple cities around the world. But they also extend their capability of their on-site developers with what they call remotes, right? So it's I think the first company that started using that word as a noun. So I found that very interesting. So it allows them to really work around the clock and have a 24-hour development cycle. It allows them to source the best people from the world, regardless of their location, and regardless of whether they are, in New York City or in LA or in Indianapolis or wherever their offices are. So they pull from the best and the brightest worldwide. It brings in not only gender diversity through PowerToFly, but also cultural diversity, which I feel is also very, very important in building products for a global audience, which they are, right? And building successful products. And all these are elements that are at the DNA of innovation, and that's key.
And I think you hear those benefits and you get really excited about, logging onto PowerToFly, starting to work and create a remote team. But then there's a part of you as a leader that thinks, I've never done this before. It's easier to just step outside of my office and actually see the people. Can you guys give a couple of examples from your experiences of how to run a remote team?
Yeah. Well, I think I just want to touch on your point about seeing people. It's very interesting management philosophy that we believe that by actually looking at someone, we can tell if they're working or not. While with remote, you can actually look at their work through shared documents, and you can look at their progress throughout the day. So, just think of the difference of going and tapping on someone's shoulder and saying, hey, have you finished this project versus actually looking at it in a Google Doc and being able to offer real-time feedback. Remote, lifts the stigma of actually being able to view someone's work in real time. In terms of the day-to-day management of remote, I've learned a huge amount from Milena on that, so I'll let her start that question off.
Well, so again, key is to have very good communication, right? So that's the number one thing we coach both companies and talent on is how to create a structure for regular communication. Different things work well for different people. So a lot of, say, development teams already operate on either daily scrum calls or daily stand-ups or whatever it is. By all means, if that's what works for you, just make it include a virtual audience, whether people are video conferencing in or calling in. That stand-up has to continue and have that as a regular check-in. It's absolutely document your progress. So use those shared documents, whether it's Google Spreadsheet or Google Doc or a PowerPoint that you're working on, or whether it's Dropbox and you're sharing graphic files, whatever is the project that you're working on, use a shared space. Also, allow time for some team building, right? And debriefs. So you actually have reflection time built into your process. That's very important. And I would also put in occasional meetups. I think that's important as well to create the human connection. Whether you want to have annual retreats or hold retreats twice a year, or you are flying in somebody on a regular basis to just have face-to-face discussion time and pull out of the day-to-day and really think strategic. This is key as well to making remote work.
And how about for developing relationships with individual team members?
Well, you're developing relationships with people by constantly talking to them. You really have to make sure that you have standing meetings that you don't break. In many ways, you actually can communicate more with someone who's remote because the physical barriers are no longer there. So when we're on business trips, we don't cancel our meetings. When there's bad weather, we don't cancel our meetings. So I think, it's as we all know, it's very hard to have meetings with leadership at a lot of companies because they're always traveling or moving around. That's not really a problem with us. So we're communicating all the time with our teams, and it's great.
In listening to that, it doesn't sound all that different from running a team in a physical space.
That's exactly the point.
You're not spending a huge amount of money on real estate, air-on chairs, snacks that nobody cares about. And you're letting people work from where they're most productive, which study after study shows that if you actually give people the space and the feeling of responsibility, they produce way more for you when they're working remotely. You also cut out commute times that add huge amounts of stress and a lot of money to people's, it adds a lot of cost to people's lives. And also let's think about the environment. The amount of resources that are spent getting people to and from work every day.
Germs on the New York City subway.
Yeah. We don't have much sickness in our group. I had the flu 2 weeks ago. The only person I could potentially give it to was Milena, and she's actually been very good at keeping it away. Oh, she got the flu shot. But it didn't spread like wildfire in our office because we don't have an office.
So now I'm sitting here and I'm wondering what the barriers are for companies who are resistant to adopting this.
Yeah.
It's all in the head. It's all mental.
It's like, we formed this, we grew up thinking that work needs to be one way. Ironically, that one way that we thought, works, it doesn't work for half the population. Also, just look at the success rates of companies that, the amount of money that's spent, especially in the startup space, on creating offices and and cultures that where the failure rate is huge. So,
And
rethink it.
yeah, I want to make the point that this is not just about moms, all right? Like, yes, moms can benefit and whatever. Our stories are stories of moms who've, stayed in workforce, figured out a new way of working, but there's a whole new generation that's growing up used to this mobility. They have their mobile phone as soon as they are 10 years old, and they're used to that mobility. And some kids are now like teens, teenagers, early 20s, the so-called millennials, right? And they will demand a different workplace. And if companies don't adjust to this more flexible and mobile way of working, they will be losing in the talent war that's out there. It's critical for them to adapt, and we're here to provide a solution for leading the way into this new way of working.
So I want to go two ways into that. The first is for a company that's just starting. It seems that it's a bit easier to start this way and scale than to maybe have an organization of 1,000 people and introduce it. Do you think that's true?
I think it's more in the middle. You see big organizations that are quite familiar with remote. I mean, they have to do remote in order to be competitive. You can't have a team in one location anymore. You can't operationally keep going. From a cost perspective, it doesn't make sense. From a diversity perspective, it doesn't make sense. So you certainly see larger companies, and the trend lines are definitely showing that more and more people are investing in remote. Small companies, it makes sense totally from an investment perspective. I think a lot of BuzzFeed's a great example of a company that people would call medium 2 years ago, which is getting very, very large, and they've been able to integrate remote very well. Washington Post is another one. They didn't have remote tech talent until really a year and a half ago, and they're flourishing.
So two thoughts on that front. One is Google has offices all over the world. People often work remotely at Google because they're working with somebody from another office, across the world. We interview former engineers in Google who've left Google because of, the lack of flexibility of this, like, I must report to the office. They're very hardcore about it. But in fact, they're very used to working remotely because, again, once you're a company of such a size, you have offices around the world, and you don't just interact with your own office, you interact with the offices all over. So that's one. Second is the examples that Katharine gave now of BuzzFeed and Washington Post. They're all examples of companies that are deploying the hybrid model, and that's totally okay, right? When you have an on-site office, I'm not saying throw it out of the door, you've done all this investment, now throw it out the door and start from scratch. No, just see where it makes sense to integrate your remote workforce and build your hybrid model.
And so you can start today, really.
Yes, start today with PowerToFly.
Yeah, and we put out a book last week that tells you how to do it too.
Are there any challenges or surprises that you would warn companies against who are about to make the shift?
I think there's challenges in any workplace, right? But you have to be hyper aware of how you communicate. You really have to set a communication plan and stick to it. Don't really daily meetings, scheduling is very important. I think that's one thing that people take for granted. People take that for granted all the time in physical workplaces too. You see people just in their cubicles that never talk to each other. I've been in these workplaces. I've worked in these workplaces. People are always listening to music, etc. So communication is just huge across the board. In remote, obviously, it's very important.
And for each of you in your experiences working at PowerToFly as a team member, what do you love about remote work?
I feel like I'm just way more productive. Not being forced to fit into a schedule that just zaps my energy every day, that makes me go to a place where I know I'm not going to be productive all the time, and yeah, it's just way more productive, happier. You don't get headaches as much.
I love the freedom, obviously, the fact that I can juggle my family's responsibilities with my professional responsibilities. That's big. And the other thing I love is I love working with people from different cultures. The cultural diversity is huge for us, and for me personally. Obviously I come from Bulgaria. Immigrant into the United States, so that's always been a part of my DNA. Married somebody, who was born in Mexico, so that's a big part. That's a big part of my DNA, and I'm really proud also to be able to give opportunities to women, in particular women in the Middle East. We just hired a lead developer in Saudi Arabia, and there's not a lot of companies who can say that one of their application architects is in Saudi Arabia and she's a woman, right? And we have 95% female technology team. That's another thing that I really love about our company. I think we're the only company out there with such a ratio, and that's it.
It's awesome.
How many countries are you guys in right now, your team?
Our team is 15. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So when you look ahead, let's fast forward 5 years and there's a magazine cover coming out, saying that there's still print magazines, but there's a magazine cover coming out and the cover story's on PowerToFly. What do you want the headline to be and what do you want the picture to be?
Revolutionizing work for businesses and women. Yeah. We've taken the workplace into the 21st century.
I'm going to start asking this question more. Thank you for the title of the article. Now you just saved me. You just saved me the step.
Well, I was a headline writer for many, many, many years.
Yeah, I was like, she's taking that question.
How about, so for you guys more in the near term, what are your plans for 2016? What are some of the goals the team has in place?
So we're keeping our focus in women in tech. We definitely have plans for further verticals down the line, but women in tech is first. And 2016 is the year where we proved that we're really making a dent in that space. We are potentially changing our business model, so that's going to be a little bit of the focus this year as well. And also, we are working on plans to engage our community into some of the business critical missions in our processes. So things like engaging our community to help us recruit talent, vet it, and let them a job.
I would say on the business model side, we're not changing the current business model. We're thinking about adding another stream to that, essentially, that would open up the platform to more people. So keeping the current business model, but extending it and scaling it to a larger group.
Perfect. All right, last questions, and these don't have to do with PowerToFly. They're just about you guys. So the first one, if you could give everyone a fortune cookie with a saying inside, what would you want to write? You can go first, Milena.
Build the airplane while flying it.
Build the airplane while flying it. What would I say? Caring too much about what people think is a great way to never get people to think differently.
Second one, which will be very fast. If you could teleport anywhere right now, where would you teleport to?
A king-size bed where I could take a nap with my child.
Wow, I don't know. Like anywhere where my kids are, right? Like I love spending time with them. So I don't know, the beach in Costa Rica with my kids on vacation, that would be awesome.
I think Katharines is a little bit easier, but we'll do our best to make both happen. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time to really demonstrate what it means to have a remote workplace. I think everyone listening in will be able to take an actionable step forward, which is very important. What's the best way for them to keep up with the two of you and then also PowerToFly?
Social. Well, Twitter, Facebook, follow our feeds, and obviously go on the website. We have a great blog, too.
and we're looking for ambassadors in key cities around the world. So please sign up for our ambassador program, and a link off of that should be available from our blog.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Gina.